Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Community Engagement Institute Spring 2024 Rising to the Challenge workshop series. Today's workshop is being recorded and we'll post this on our YouTube channel later for you to watch if you want to go back and revisit the information or share this with your colleagues who couldn't be here today. While we're getting started, if you'd like to enter your name and chat to let us know who you are and where you're visiting us from today, we'd like to see who is located the furthest away from us from Wichita, Kansas. I'll go ahead and get us started. My name is Zane May. If we haven't met before, I have been hosting these workshops and I work in CEI's Organizational Development Center at the Community Engagement Institute. If you're interested in learning more about CEI and the work that we do, we would, of course, let you browse our website, but we also invite you to reach out and start a conversation with us. Today, I am joined by Teresa Cornejo. She's going to lead us through the third workshop of this series, and she'll be talking to us about healthy teamwork and trauma-resilient practices. This five-part workshop series is focused on enhancing our teamwork and our ability to collaborate with each other. If you have any technical issues during the meeting, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will put my email in chat in case you need to send an email, or you can send me a direct message. We have about an hour together today, so I'm going to get ready to hand it over to Teresa. But really quick, let's see who we have in the room with us and where you guys are coming from. So I see a lot of folks joining us from Topeka. We have Christine all the way from Colorado. Thanks for being here, Christine. And we have Bailey from South Dakota. It's really great to see folks from out of state joining us today. We're so glad to have you here. Lots of great small towns around Kansas as well that we've been to, and some people in Iowa. So it's really good to see all of you. Thank you for being here. I'll give you some information at the end of this about how you can join our other workshops that are scheduled this time, and then also let you know about some upcoming events that you might be interested in. Teresa, we have an hour, so I'm going to hand it over to you so that you have plenty of time to lead us through your presentation. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Zane. And you said Bailey from South Dakota, and I got a little weirded out. It's my daughter. So, hello, daughter. So I didn't know she was going to be here. So excited about that. Good morning. As Zane said, my name is Teresa Cornejo, and I'm director of the Impact Center here at CEI. It's not the hat I'm wearing to be here today. I've also been a member of our trauma-informed systems of care team since it started in 2009. That particular team provides consulting, training, and coaching for teams, executives, organizations, and communities who are interested in adopting or strengthening their trauma-informed practices. Professionally, I'm a social worker and an organization development practitioner. Personally, I'm a wife to Ed. I am a mom of two spectacular children. I didn't even plan that. With two bonus children and a son-in-law and stepdaughter. And I'm an avid sports fan, which you may pick up on as we go through the slides and the conversations here this morning. So as a sports fan, it's been fun to use sports metaphors as I thought about the work of being part of a team. So over the next hour together, I'll present you with some ideas to rent about having a game plan or strategies for how you want to work as a team. In addition, sports teams are most effective when they practice. Therefore, I will also provide some examples of ways to practice incorporating trauma and trauma resilience into your team culture. So I want to start with asking you to think about a team experience you've had where you felt included, you felt a sense of purpose, you felt valued and connected, and you felt like you were able to contribute to progress towards an outcome. Just think to yourself what that was like. What was provided or offered or available that helped you feel that way? Was there anything more that could have been done or provided to strengthen those feelings, or perhaps to help other team members have that same experience? Creating the experience of team can be challenging, as I'm sure many of you know, because people are unique. We're different. We come with many experiences. We come with various preferences for how to work and how to get work done. We have different competing priorities and so on. Teaming requires us to be intentional and committed to more than just getting tasks done. Teaming is also a lot of individual work, even though we think about it as group work. So a lot has been said since 2020 about the impact of hybrid and remote work, especially the impact of that on our team experiences. There are folks who believe that hybrid and remote work complicate collaboration or teaming, but honestly, the reality is that the types of problems associated with hybrid or remote work actually were there long before the pandemic started. It's just that the pandemic just kind of exposed those deficiencies in the in-person model, which were then exacerbated by forced and abrupt shift to that remote hybrid work situation. So some examples of those deficiencies are inefficiency, lack of accountability, long hours, and poor group dynamics. Those things were all there before. It's not remote work, virtual, it's not the fault of all of that. All of that existed for a lot of our teams prior. So there are many things that contribute to the frustrations of working with others, but the one that's the most basic and also the most important is our definition and our expectation of what a team is and what the team does or should be doing. So I recently came across an article in a publication called Strategy Plus Business, or S+B. The article was written by Benjamin Tarshis and Jonathan Roberts and published in the summer 2022 edition, if you want to look it up. And the title is exactly what you see on the screen. Teaming is hard because you're probably not really on a team. This hooked me. I was like, what? So think about that. It's common for us to name a group of people organized for work as a team. Think about it though, people showing up for basketball practice does not automatically make them a team. Showing up in the same space is not enough. So in the article, they offer their definitions of 3 types of teams and their characteristics, which I'm going to review as part of a game plan for determining what type of team or teams you are on and the characteristics that can be aligned with the intention of the team for the best results. So let's talk game plan. So strategy number 1 has 2 parts, and it involves considering what type of team you are now. The authors identified 3 types of teams, and we all know there are actually many ways to define or describe what a team is. I liked these because I think they identify some characteristics that we often maybe see as problematic, but that are reframed based on what a group is trying to accomplish together. So the 3 types they describe are teams in name only, working groups, and what they call real teams. So the first one is teams in name only are those that claim the name of team, but is basically individuals in the same literal or virtual place. These teams don't really talk about things like how they do their work, what the objectives are, whether there are any commitments to others doing similar work. These individuals don't have commitments to shared purpose or how others doing the work may feel or experience other people. The way these folks work is often not efficient because we're just doing it our own way, and the responsibility falls solely on me. How I choose to work becomes my default way I work, and it doesn't require me to be disciplined or have a commitment to or use a particular approach or system or even inclusion of other people. And I've been in these kinds of meetings. Meetings often involve one-to-one conversations between an individual and the manager at the table, and everyone kind of goes around and says their own like updates or, you know, tells the manager what's going on, but it's not really a collective conversation, right? So that's a team in name only as these folks define it. The second type is working groups, and this is what the authors call the most common type of team. And I would agree, this is more familiar and more prevalent in our work. These teams are efficient and honestly are the best approach for getting tasks done, especially tasks that have pretty clear steps or kind of ways of getting done. The manager's role for working groups is to make resources and systems available that increase efficiency for people to get the work done. Team members still work fairly independently with emotional commitment to others and shared purpose not being necessary in order to get those things done. Individuals are held accountable for work and for the task completion. And for those of you who are part of work teams that use the stand-up model of teaming, working groups are really good at those stand-up meetings in order to keep work moving and ensuring that everyone's parts are moving in the same direction or toward the same goals. If those stand-up meetings are taking longer than 5-10 minutes, it's not really a stand-up meeting and it's not really kind of a working group type situation. So in sports metaphor, this working group or this kind of an approach could be like a golf team with individuals doing what they can to improve or complete goals so that the group or the team is successful and wins their tournaments. So the third one is real teams. And to be honest, this title is a bit misleading for me. It makes it sound like working groups or other kinds of teams. Some of you may be on teams called transdisciplinary. That may be an older term. Makes it sound like those kinds of teams aren't real. But I also think that that's the point the authors are trying to make. So real teams are not efficient. They're not best suited for typical kinds of task or work completion. Real teams take a lot of energy, focus, commitment. It shouldn't be the goal for every team to function this way because real teams are focused intently on solving a single, very complex issue that doesn't have any obvious solution. So if any of you have been through Kansas Leadership Center, this would be sort of the example of adaptive challenges, right? These complex issues that don't have a technical solution. Real teams establish and prioritize trust first. They have and utilize and really respect team norms and agreements about how to work, common goals, and have a strong commitment to a shared purpose, that complex issue, and finding some way to affect that or make progress on it. Team members are committed to challenging each other and thinking together collectively about the issue, not just doing things or getting tasks done. Real teams need leaders who are nimble and flexible and are focused on member connections, focused on identifying and holding clear boundaries, and work to reinforce trust through transparent communication, actions that are inclusive, even if those actions take longer, making observations of team dynamics in order for the group to evaluate itself and make adjustments. These leaders also specifically listen for what is not being said that might need to be attended to by the team. So let's pause there for a second as we're also considering the second part of this strategy is, so what do you think? Think about that team that you thought about a minute ago, or maybe another one that's come to mind as I've talked through this. Does that team fit into one of these three types? Now, no team is going to demonstrate every characteristic, but a team might exemplify more of, of one of these than another. Think about that team's work. What is it? And then think about what type of team might work better or could be the kinds of things that could be strengthened for that team to really achieve its goal. Okay, so applying a sense of determining what type of team, what's the goal, and what's going to be the best structure for that. So the second strategy in our game plan is about having a team mindset. So this is essentially your uniform, again, sports analogy, right? Team mindset is mainly about how we show up. Are we invested? Are we distracted? Are we checking a box? Team mindset is being intentional about engaging in alignment with the intention of the team. So teams in name only have a different kind of engagement than real teams, right? So if the team isn't engaging its members well, part of being engaged might include us calling attention to or asking about what engagement is for this team and what are our expectations around it. And that doesn't have to be done by the team leader or facilitator or supervisor. It can be any of us. Being part of a team means we also don't jump to the worst assumptions about other team members' intentions or actions, which can be really hard, especially if it's, not in line with what I think. We assume in a healthy team and in a team mindset, we're assuming that people are doing the best they can with what they have, their time, their energy, their resources. We still hold accountability. And we're curious about what might be happening for someone if their actions or their reactions don't seem to match the situation. And we do that with compassion and grace. That's the trauma-informed piece. Regardless of our role, it's usually a good strategy to listen more than speak, especially if you're typically someone who talks a lot. If you're someone who doesn't say much, you might try to find ways to contribute if speaking in a group isn't your most effective tool. I heard recently of a group agreement called stretch, meaning that if you tend to talk a lot, stretch and practice being quiet. And if you tend to be quieter, practice or stretch by speaking or finding a way to contribute. If you are a leader of such meetings, consider how you can ensure a variety of ways for people to contribute. Writing, small groups, those kinds of things. Before and during discussions, if you know that a decision or a path has been determined or is preferred, be transparent about it. So for example, you might say, this is the path that's being considered, or this is the path that's been approved. I'm curious how that's landing for folks or what we will need to do to make this work. That is so much better than, what do you think about a path like XYZ, right? Because then we're, asking for input that may not be able to be honestly considered. So let's talk about the reality of this being the path and what needs to happen as a result of that. A team mindset means that we also are respecting people's time, energy, and resources. Don't take any longer than necessary. 5 minutes stand up, hold that. Hold true to that. Don't take 15 or 20. But also take as long as necessary. So when we're dealing with a complex problem and we may have, trying to operate as a real team, we need to take the time that is needed to have the kinds of productive conversations that help get us towards progress. Please do not meet if it can be an email and you don't have intended connections that need to happen during the meeting. If it's just updates, if it's, information sharing, that sort of thing, respecting people's time and resources means that we, share it in other ways that take less of that time. It also means that if there are agenda items that do need decisions or action steps or agreements, such as who will do what by when, that we're working together toward that end. So we're not, it's always good to connect. It's always good to catch up with people. It's always good to say, hey, how's your March Madness bracket working, going for you. And make sure that you're keeping on task once the meeting starts. One of the things that I see happen a lot is, especially in virtual meetings, we'll have like all kinds of different kinds of jokes and things like that happening in chat, which to a point is nice and personal. And for some, it can be incredibly distracting. So just keeping focused on the purpose of the meeting and the what's happening, and make sure that you're helping to move things forward. Another piece is, if there is an item that keeps showing up on an agenda that's not really getting any progress made, or it's mostly just discussion, pay attention to how there might be an underlying issue that needs attention or resolution. That can be a flag to pay attention to. And so it could invite a different type of conversation or questioning about, wow, I keep seeing this on the agenda. We keep talking about it, but I'm not sure that we ever kind of get to a next step. What would it look like? What might be happening that's keeping us from that? Being very intentional in that regard. So then the third strategy that I am recommending for your playbook or your game plan is what I'm calling trauma resilient practices or plays that you can incorporate into your team culture. So again, using the sports team analogy, it takes practice to execute plays well. Trauma resilient practices might be familiar to you, or they might be an area of stretch for you and or for your team. You may not have, if you know about trauma, the guiding principles and trauma resilient practices, it may not be something that you've tried to incorporate specifically into a team culture. So practice is the best way to get better. And it also means that we're not gonna be, undefeated in our first season. So the graphic you see on your screen shows 6 principles of trauma-informed care that come from SAMHSA. That's the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. So I'm going to offer a few ideas for teams related to just 4 of these. For sports teams and for work teams, safety first is always a good strategy to keep people in the game and ready. So the overarching strategy that I recommend is attending to how the team, both individuals and as a collective, manage and respond to being challenged, to there being expression of concerns or grievances, the setting of and respecting of boundaries, and the tolerance of the expression of emotion. Any of these kinds of things, like what does our team culture look and feel like that allow for safety in the face of things that might be challenging or difficult to talk about? So the rest of what's on this slide are kind of examples of that. So can our team have tough conversations about what's affecting how we are functioning? And can we do that in a way that isn't risky or feel threatening? We should also, as a team, make agreements and set boundaries about how we have these kinds of conversations. Kind of how do we create a safe zone or a brave space to talk about the hard stuff? The other piece of that is having an agreement that we're going to talk about situations and we're not going to blame people. right? So kind of pulling people, individuals out of the issue and talk about the dynamic or the situation that might be the challenge. It can also promote safety when we have agreements about what terms such as respect mean to us collectively. These kinds of terms are often loaded, they're value-based, they're very individual. It could be influenced by culture or generational experience. Another term that we talk about is professionalism. What does that mean to us as a collective? Doing that helps us limit a sense of threat or causing unintended harm when we are clear about what we mean by those terms. Safety in our connections with others means that we're always tuned into our own triggers, or our reactions or our dysregulation, and that we're always working to manage those. This is that individual piece that I was talking about. When we're dysregulated, when we're triggered, our thinking brain is offline and our emotional brain is in charge. And that means we're not thinking about choices of how we might respond to a situation. We're just reacting. We are not processing language, verbal or nonverbal, like thinking about where it might be coming from or what it might mean. We're just reacting. Our emotional brain and operating out of that is about a need to protect ourselves primarily. It's again, it's safety, and it is making sure that we are surviving in the context of a situation. And our reactions may have an undesired or harmful impact on others. So we want to make sure that we're constantly sort of aware of what those triggers are for ourselves and how we can manage those in the moment. And then finally, there is a fine line between having tough, honest conversations and publicly criticizing or punishing people. And we all have to weigh how much the group needs to be involved in addressing harm that occurs in the group versus addressing it in a one-on-one or just including those who are directly involved. This kind of decision-making or situation doesn't have a manual. You just kind of have to have a feel for that. If the heat of a discussion is too high and there's not substantial trust among the members in order to move through and towards resolution, the group might need to take a pause so that the individuals involved can work through the issue. But here's the thing, be sure to come back to the full group to acknowledge what happened and the effect that it may have had even on those who weren't directly involved. And in all of this, whether it's one-on-one, group, smaller group, subgroup, make sure that repair is part of the acknowledgement and the resolution. So it's not enough for just the one or two or three people involved to resolve it amongst themselves, but there has to be a repair component. Apology is fundamental and necessary, and the repair piece can be, and here's what I will do to, now I know better, so I'll do better, and here's what that's going to look like. So I want to give you just a quick example that happened on my team of this very thing. So I had a team member a few years ago, and this was during COVID, so all of our interactions were virtual. She very upfront told me that she identifies as non-binary. She was very open with our team about that. I asked her about her preferred pronouns, and she said she, her, which she also was very open with the team about. I've always told my staff or my team to please let me know if I do or say something harmful or ignorant or offensive, or that could be. Not because I'm making them responsible for me, but because sometimes I just need that mirror. I'm not seeing it, right? So during our virtual team meetings, I would always start with, Hello, ladies. It's so good to see you. Well, after a few times, one of my staff, not the particular team member, a different team member, messaged me and said, yeah, I think you're missing something there, and made me aware of my ignorance. And I was like, oh my gosh, I totally did not do the work to go beyond the pronoun piece of that to understand more about what non-binary meant, especially for my particular team member. So I apologized to the staff member who brought it to my attention and I thanked them. And then I went directly to the team member who identifies as non-binary and I acknowledged my offense and I apologized and we talked about, kind of what that looks like going forward. The team member who identifies as non-binary was so grateful and indicated feeling seen in a way that she had not experienced in her personal or professional life in quite that same way. And she even went on to tell me that her family members refused to learn and acknowledge and respect her choice around identifying as non-binary. At the next meeting, team meeting, I then made sure that I acknowledged to the team, this is the repair piece, that I acknowledged to the team my misstep. I expressed thanks for the team member who brought it to my attention, and I made a commitment to do better going forward, reiterating my invite for others to bring things like this to me. This was a real live opportunity as a facilitator of our team to demonstrate my own vulnerability and to also demonstrate this expectation for ensuring that we have an environment that is safe and supportive and inclusive. Went so much further than, most of our trainings can go, right? Is that in the moment sort of acknowledgement of, yeah, I messed that up. So it was powerful for me, which is less important, but it was also very powerful for the person that I had been ignorant in terms of her preferences. And it was powerful for the team member who brought it to me in terms of feeling that it was risky and then being able to say, oh, okay, so this is how that happens. This is how Teresa will respond when I bring up things in the future. So it's very powerful for all of us. All right. So the next trauma resilient play that I want to talk about is trust or trustworthiness. And this also connects to that team mindset as well. So I want to point out something that when I ask people, or we, in any of our trainings or conversations, when we talk about trust and what's required, a lot of people will say, well, relationship. I got to have a relationship with the person in order to be able to trust them. And I want to challenge that thinking by saying trust requires connection, because we can immediately have a sense of trust with someone that we've just met or that we have a limited interaction with. Is it going to feel and be the same as someone that we have a long-standing relationship with? No. But what's required in any of those scenarios is connection first. Definitely trust and relationship is built over time, but it's built over time as a function of connections that are experienced through things like rapport, establishing rapport, being authentic, expressing a true sensitivity around a person's experience, being responsive, validating people's experience. So really think about that distinction between connection and relationship and how that factors in, especially in your teaming. Because I don't necessarily need or want a relationship with every person on my team, but I probably need connection with every person on my team. So that distinction, rent the idea. Another way to promote trust is to be transparent about expectations and decisions, especially emphasizing the why. So I don't know if y'all had parents who ever said this. I did on occasion. My parents said this on occasion. Because I'm the parent, that's why. That had never worked, right? That never really that didn't do much for me as a kid, other than to tell me that I didn't need to know. I wasn't trusted to know or to understand what was, why my parent expected a certain thing. And that's true for us in teams as well. When we understand the why, even if we don't like it, it gives us a sense of, or it can give us a sense of feeling included, valued, trusted, respected as part of the work and as part of the team. We'd want to avoid using paternalism in an attempt to protect staff whenever possible. Being transparent and acknowledging why things are the way they are or a decision is made, and not emphasizing, well, it's because, the director said, or it's because the, supervisor said. It's really not sufficient, okay? No matter what your role is, whether you have a leadership role, a supervisory role, or a membership role in a team, you can keep an eye on trust being built or being undermined in the team. And one way to do this is to pay attention to what is said, but also what isn't being said. So, like, how do you do that, right? So one strategy for noticing what's not said is to make and possibly state what KLC calls observations. So observations are the things that we can actually see and notice, but without interpretation initially. Okay, so this is noticing out loud when things change in an interaction. And doing that can be very powerful. It can open the door to talk about dynamics that might be affecting people or our team, but that are difficult maybe to start a conversation about. Those things typically aren't on an agenda. This does not have to be done by a supervisor or leader of the team, although it can be especially powerful when an authority figure in the room uses this effectively. And by effectively, I mean maintaining a tone of curiosity, not blame, being compassionate, not accusatory, or have kind of a double meaning in what we say. At CEI, we have a colleague who coined terms called accusations and quagestions. Do those, right? Covering kind of blame or accusatory statements and putting them in, a question mark at the end doesn't make them less harmful. So those and then quagestions are the exact same thing, making suggestions in the form of a question. Those aren't particularly helpful. So some examples that I created for the purposes of today that would illustrate making and stating observations would be, sitting in a team meeting and saying, I noticed when we started to talk about XYZ, about 5 of us looked down or looked away. I'm curious about what may have happened in our group. And the key to that is to then stop talking and open the space for responses. Another way to do that could be saying, I'm noticing we're unusually quiet today. I wonder what might be happening or have happened in our group or to folks in our group that is impacting that. Making observations and then holding interpretations and holding space for response helps to kind of create space and unearth things that aren't being expressed or said that can feel particularly risky. So I'm going to pause there. We can talk about that in if y'all have comments or questions here in a bit. And then the final one I want to talk about is a combination of collaboration, mutual support, and voice and choice as trauma resilient practices I'm going to talk about all together. I combine them for the purposes of time and also because I feel like they connect fairly well. So collaboration is often expected, whether it's stated or not, in our work as teams. It's sort of assumed that we're gonna, teams need to work collaboratively. As a field instructor for social work students, I can tell you that the #1 complaint every single year are group projects, right? Collaboration is not a naturally occurring experience, just putting people together, right? So mutual support can be a critical function also of effective teaming. So this idea of collaboration and mutual support kind of being tied together. So collaboration and mutual support requires that we're investing in each other in a way that promotes a sense of value and shared purpose. And when we do that, the sort of operations of being a team becomes less of a task, right? Like there's a synergy and a motor that is working when we have those collaboration and mutual support are healthy. It's kind of like that specialness that we sometimes hear when a sports team defies the odds or achieves some level of greatness. It's that idea of us being more than the sum of our individual parts or our individual members, right? And so it's that piece of working together, but it's not about the work, it's about the connection. It's also important for collaboration and for mutual support that we know what each person brings to the work. And sometimes people bring things that really aren't found on a resume. It's kind of an X factor. And then we want to be able to connect those things, talents, skills, X factors, interests and talents to the work, to projects, to things that need to get done. I may have a certain skill set. Zane has a particular skill set. When we compare those together for in tandem for a project, it's going to go a lot better than if Teresa tries to do the things that Zane's actually better at. Voice and choice means that we have various or multiple ways to participate in meetings or activities. And this includes opting out. We don't often think about opting out as an option. So having the option to opt out of particularly non-mandatory events. So that means that we need to be intentional about what is mandatory and what isn't, right? This also means that we're purposeful about meeting agendas and activities so that time boundaries and resources are respected for individuals. So for example, not scheduling meetings before 8:30 or 9 or after 4 or 4:30 in a respect for individuals who use that, 30 minutes to an hour at the beginning of the day, 30 minutes to an hour at the end of the day to kind of get ready and wrap up, right? So we're trying to keep those meetings at a time. And another pet peeve of mine is meetings that happen over lunch. Give people, now I work over lunch, but I don't want to be in a meeting over lunch, right? I want that to be my choice, and I don't want to dictate that for folks. So meeting over lunch should be a collective choice and not mandatory. That's just my opinion. Also, I'm gonna say it again, don't have a meeting that could have been an email. Just don't do it. Okay. What I tend to do on my agendas, on my meeting agendas, is I will color code, and the things that are not discussion items, but are just FYI, I put in black, and the discussion items are in green. And so then people can review those things that are non-discussion items or just updates or FYIs on their own time. And then we're focused on the things that need action or discussion when we meet. A couple of other activities that I incorporate into my meetings. One of those is called needs and offers. Okay, so needs and offers is a time that I typically do out. I'm going to talk about a gathering activity here in a minute, but I usually typically do this pretty soon after the gathering activity. And it's a time for members to share things that they might need resources or suggestions, or they might need somebody else's skill. They might need a community contact, any of those kinds of things. And then the offer comes from everyone else in the team of, hey, have you thought of this? Hey, I have a template for that. Hey, I use this app, whatever those things might be. What this does is a couple things. One, it builds a network that relies less on a supervisor or a manager or a certain person to provide information or direction, which makes the work more efficient. And then it also promotes these trauma resilient practices of collaboration and mutual support. So we're connecting people in real time around real things, without having to do team building out activities to get there. So for gathering activities, first and foremost, I keep it short. There are organizational cultures, there are individuals who just really don't function that way. They don't think like that. They're not about it. So gathering activities, we want to make sure that we're keeping them timely, and that we're keeping them optional, and that we are keeping them from being what I would call silly, right? Like, don't make me hop on one foot, or, do trust falls, or, things like that, where there's a risk to me. The gathering activities is really, again, about connection. There are options to participate, but then there's options in terms of how to participate. I also choose activities that I hope don't require personal sharing that could feel risky. And then I try to keep in mind social cues that might represent colonized thinking, and I work to eliminate those. So for example, the question that you see there that I said is good for February. February is the month of Valentine's Day. So every month in my team, I try to think of something that kind of corresponds with the month. But I tried to make sure that the question was such that it didn't assume that everyone wants or has a one-to-one love relationship. So the question is, what is something or someone you love that you're willing to share? And I will tell you, I learned more about staff from that question than I have from any others. And it was so non-typical. Like, you kind of think people are going to say, oh, my children, or my dog, or, my chocolate, we got answers around music. We got answers around, I can't remember what it's called, but it's where, like, we had a person at that time who is really into building and sustaining bee colonies. Like, she was all about that, right? We learned so much about each other with that question, and it was, it's not a very fancy question. But they really liked that one. Another one that we've done is favorite reality show or podcast and why. And I don't know whether to be concerned about my staff, but there were a lot of us who were really into true crime podcasts. So I don't know what that says about us, but yeah, it was fun and interesting. And then we also learned, oh, what podcast is that? Okay, I'm going to watch that. I'm going to look that up. So really good connecting time, and took 10 minutes, right? Nice to do at the beginning. There's also an activity that I've done, and you can adapt this to be done virtually. But it's basically saying, okay, let's open it up. Name something that someone on the team who did something that you especially appreciated. It was recent, and tell a little bit about what happened. Again, it's just sort of like that, man, Zane helped me figure out how to turn the dinger off of my Outlook emails right before this meeting. And so I so appreciate that. And that feels good, right? So just those little things that we can incorporate into our team interactions that really prioritizes connection over tasks or projects. Okay. So our game plan includes identifying the type of team you are, the type of team the work needs, adopting a team mindset, and incorporating these trauma resilient plays. And there are so many others. I mean, we could go on and on into your team engagements. So I want you to go back to thinking about a team that you're currently a part of. You may have already been the one from earlier. It may be a different one. So I want you to think to yourself, and if you're willing, you can unmute or throw it in chat. What parts of this game plan that we've talked about could strengthen the work of the team you're thinking about? You don't need to tell us about the team or what the work is, but are there any of the things that you've kind of heard today that you're like, man, that could really make a difference in how we work or the progress that we want to make? And I want to give that some more thought. I'm checking chat, y'all. So feel free to connecting activities to build trust and the offers and needs exercise. Great, Brick. Thank you for sharing that. Anything else somebody's thinking about or wants to share? Rent the idea of connection and relationship not being the same thing. Yeah. And Kristen, let me know, like, through Zane or whatever, but let me know kind of where you because I'm open to feedback that no, I'm still in the requires a relationship, piece. I don't have all the answers for sure. Brooke, thank you. Yeah, calling yourself out if you make a mistake, owning up to it. So powerful for folks, for colleagues, as well as if you're a supervisor. Creating agreements around how we're going to talk about difficult things. Yeah, I mean, so important, and something that I think we kind of assume, but or we think, oh, we know each other well enough. We can talk about tough stuff. But I think in the era of particularly around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, it's really, really helpful to be open and transparent about those kinds of things, because we don't all come from the same kinds of experiences. Trauma resilient plays for building stronger connections. Excellent. Being respectful of each other's time. That's a big one. And I see Carrie, you're here. I know you used to have, I don't know if you still do, but Carrie used to have a really great thing on her email signature plate that said basically, hey, if you get this email at a time that doesn't work for you, just respond when it does. Like, I want to respect your time. Yeah. Anything else? Safety first. Yeah. Yeah. From the beginning and then continuing, because we're not gonna be able to anticipate every possible harm, but really trying to include in the way we function this idea around safety. and what can potentially cause harm. There was another group agreement that I read about when I read about the stretch one that was called ouch. And it's basically, if it hurts, say so, right? So this idea of being able to kind of call out harm in the moment, but not doing so in an accusatory way, but in a very authentic kind of, wow, that hit. And here's why. Anything else folks are thinking about? Reiterating, sometimes I need others' viewpoint to see me in my own mirror. Man, holding up the mirror, as a field instructor, I'm really good at holding it up for other people, but man, holding it up, having others hold it up for myself is like, oh my gosh, I totally missed that, or I totally didn't see that. Color coding agendas, yeah, feel free to, and if you guys have, templates that you use, I'd love to see them, or little ways that you do that, to help, prioritize things. Yeah, thank you all. Transparency is it's such a big thing. And I think for a lot of us, we've learned, somewhere we picked up this idea that as supervisors, managers, or leaders, we're supposed to know everything, and we're supposed to like have all the answers. And so a lot of transparency is really about acknowledging that we probably don't have either, and we may not have authority. And so it's not offering excuses, but the true whys. Yeah, multiple ways to communicate, yeah, is really, as an introvert, I really appreciate being able to have time to reflect before I respond, and not having to speak what's going through my head, but having an opportunity, because for me, I process through writing or typing, and so that helps me kind of put my words and my ideas together. So having those opportunities to contribute can be really, really powerful for folks that you may not hear that much from otherwise. Or they're the ones like me who send the emails after that say, hey, I was thinking about that. And then there's like 12 ideas, and, whoever I send it to is going, seriously, why didn't you bring that up during the meeting? Because I didn't have the thought in the meeting. Like, it took me a while to reflect on that. So lots of different options and ways there. So related to any of those that you've named, I want you to sort of think to yourself, what are some steps then that you might want to take in the next couple of weeks, to either share what you learned today, or make recommendations if that's necessary, to make recommendations to other people of how you might incorporate some of these things. But just any of these ideas, what are some steps that you might take in the next couple of weeks to kind of impact or strengthen your team interactions? And you can just jot those down for yourself. You don't have to share those with us. But I just want to give you, again, that reflecting time to just make some notes. If there are steps, is there a conversation you need to have? Do you need to adapt a template or a form that you use? Any of those kinds of things. Any questions or thoughts that you haven't already shared in chat that you can either unmute or bring up now, put in chat now? And then, at the risk of people feeling like they can't really say that, we do have about a minute and a half before we end our time together. So if anyone has questions or thoughts after this and you want follow-up, please reach out to Zane, and he can either forward those to me if necessary, or he can respond with whatever answers he may have. And thank you all. I've really enjoyed putting this together. I've really enjoyed learning as a part of this process. And I hope that there are some nuggets here that will be useful to you all as well. So take care. And Zane, do you have closing things to say?
I do. Thank you, Teresa. I'm going to drop a link in our chat. If you click on that, it takes you to our evaluation where you can give us feedback and let us know how this workshop was for you. We want to know how we're doing, and we're always looking for ways to improve our workshops to be more effective and engaging. And we also have a place in that evaluation where you can tell us what topics and trainings would be helpful to you in the future. And in previous surveys, we had heard from folks that attended the last Rising to the Challenge that they wanted to hear about effective teamwork. So that helped us shape this series for you all. We'll be looking to offer Rising to the Challenge again in the fall. And so any ideas that you have, we will take that feedback and craft our next workshop series. So this was the third workshop in our series. Next week, Carrie McMahon is going to be talking about the worst practices in team performance. I think it's going to be a really fun presentation for you all to join and get to hear about some of the terrible ways that teams have performed or worked together. And it's just a lot of fun if you enjoy digging into the tea, the gossip, and the drama. It's not going to be about anyone you know, hopefully, but you might see some things that you've noticed in the workplace, or you might see some things that you can avoid down the road. So we hope to see you there. This training will be put up on our YouTube page, and you can still register for the 2 remaining workshops that we have. Hopefully we'll see you there. Please have a good week, and we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday.